Jaya Radha Gopinath Radha Gopinath Radhe. Jaya Radhe Jaya Radhe Jaya Radhe Jaya Shri Radhe. O Jaya Vrishabhanu Nandini Radhe Radhe Vrishabhanu Nandini Radhe Radhe. O Radhe 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 Radhe. Hari Hari Bol. Jai Sachinandana Gaura Hari Ki Jai. Jai Shri Radha Gopinath Ju Ki Jai. Radharani Vrishabhanu Nandini Rajeshwari Ki Jai. Srila Gurudev Ki Jai. Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Anantakota Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Go Premanandi Hari Hari Bol. Ekadasi Brat Ki Jai. Om Aginati Mirandasya Gyananjala Shalakaya Chakshu Unmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Guruve Gaurachandraya Radhikaya Taralaye Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Tarabhaktaya Namo Namaha. Yam Pravajantamanapethyam Apetya Krityam Dvaipayano Viraha Katara Ajuhava Putreti Tammayatayo Taravo Binedustam Sarvabhutam Munimanatoshmi Bhaktya Vihina Aparada Lakshay Shiptascha Karmadi Taranga Mahadye Kripa Maitvam Sharanam Prapana Brinde Namaste Charanaravindam Bhajami Radham Aravinda Netram Smarami Radham Madhurashmitasyam Vadami Radham Karuna Varadram Tato Mamanasti Katyana Chapi. I first of all offer millions and millions of Dandavat pranams unto the lotus feet of my most beloved Gurudev, Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Asto Tarasara Shishimad Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj. And the same again, millions and millions of times, unto the lotus feet of our beloved Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Asto Tarasara Shishimad Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, and all the Vaishnavi devotees of the Lord. Dandavat pranams. So, yesterday we discussed the 10 stages described in the Bhagavatam. Sargo, Vishadas, Stanam, Poshanam, Uti, you tell.
Uti,
Manvantara, Anukata, Ishkata. Yes.
And
Nirodha,
and Ashaya. No.
Nirodha Muktiya.
Nirodha Muktiya.
Don't leave out the Muktiya. Nirodha, Muktiya, Ashraya. So these are the 10 stages of the Bhagavatam. Very wonderful to contemplate going through. So I'm going to speak something of the Chatushloki this morning. It's quite an intense topic, but I think for Ekadashi, maybe it's good. I don't know. But Chatushloki is very profound. It contains everything within existence is actually within this Chatushloki. So I'm just going to say the translations of the 2 verses before this Chatushloki. So now we know the scene. Lord Brahma, he first of all received from Saraswati this Gopal mantra. He chanted this Gopal mantra, Divya Saraswati. He chanted this Gopal mantra sitting on the lotus. It's described for a long period of time. And due to the success of his austerity, then the sound of Krishna's flute came through his 8 ear holes. And he heard this Gayatri mantra, the calm Gayatri mantra. So he's heard 2 mantras, Gopal and calm Gayatri mantra. And then on hearing that mantra and reflecting on it, just for a short period of time, Krishna immediately manifests because he's non-different to this calm Gayatri mantra. And Krishna manifests, and in Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada's translation, it's saying that he shook Lord Brahma's hand. If you read the translation of Srila Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur, it's saying that he touched Lord Brahma. So either way, he made physical contact with Lord Brahma, who was most deeply affected by that affectionate exchange by Krishna. And I've explained already that he requested Krishna that to give him the mercy to remain humble on hearing these verses. So now, this has just happened. So now in verse 31, the personality of Godhead said, "Knowledge about me, as described in the scriptures, is very confidential, and it has to be realized in conjunction with devotional service. The necessary paraphernalia for that process is being explained by me. You may take it up carefully." So, in other words, he's saying immediately, this is not a path of Gyan Kand. I'm not about to deliver something to you just for your intellectual exercise, just for you to become knowledgeable. It's about devotional service. It's understanding how to more deeply be focused in our practice of devotional service. Knowledge is a corollary. It's going to help us. It's not bhakti. It's going to help us to clear our vision so that we can perform our devotion more successfully, more progressively. The Gyan is like a support. It's not the principle. So he explains like this. And then in text 32, Krishna is saying immediately, he comes straight to the point. He says, all of me, this is not the Chatushloki yet, the Chatushloki is the next verse. All of me, namely my actual eternal form and my transcendental existence, color, qualities and activities, let all be awakened within you by factual realization out of my causeless mercy. And again, this is a mood of having direct realization of that personality of Godhead. And because Krishna is very emphatically saying, all of me, just like in the first verse, the next verse, it's very emphatic about his personal form. We are coming from something of an impersonal conception. I've said many times how Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he describes our state of consciousness in the body of Mahavishnu. He describes it as being of a Shanta Ras nature. Shanta means neutrality. We are in that body of Mahavishnu, and we don't want to go up and we don't want to go down. We're something of an impersonal mentality. This is the state that we have experienced in the spiritual world. That spiritual world that we experienced was just a fraction of the effulgence of the Brahmajyoti. That is what we have experienced previously. That is our spiritual sanskar, so to speak. And that spiritual sanskar was of an impersonal nature. Therefore, it's very simple for us just to flip into the impersonal consciousness now. This is what our whole battle with is, practically speaking, accepting the personal form of the Lord. I remember when I first heard this description so many years ago, that Krishna was a person, there was no way that I could wrap my head around it. I had not begun to think of Krishna as, I had prayed to God all my life, but I had never been courageous enough to put a form to that God. It's a lot easier when he's just a blur, when he doesn't have a personality. It's a lot easier to sort of escape him, because you don't think he's that much real, because he doesn't actually have a form. He doesn't actually have eyes, etc. He doesn't see directly what you do, so it's kind of easy just to slip out of any direct responsibility to God. But here, from the very beginning, he's saying all of me, my qualities, my color, my form, etc., will be described to you, and by realization. Realization comes from where? Vigyan comes, it's a concomitant factor from our devotional service. We can hear so many truths, but unless we begin to practice this essence of the sadhan bhajan, which is devotional service, even if we're chanting, meditating on the Lord, we can meditating on the Lord with a mood of seva. This is my spiritual nature. My nature, Krishna Seva Vasana. My nature is to serve Krishna. It's the very essence of the soul.
Just one question, going back to a point you made a few sentences ago about our spiritual samskaras.
Yeah.
Samskara once in the spiritual world.
Yeah.
How would this be support for those who believe that we fell from the spiritual world as an argument? I mean, just to differentiate that it's not a fall down from the spiritual world.
Well, you see, this word fall is very confusing because the acharyas use that word. Because in a sense, we did, like physically, so to speak, fall into the darkness of this material world. But where did we fall from? Yes, we fall from a spiritual place because we are eternally spiritual beings. We have never been born, we'll never die. So we have come from a spiritual place. But what is the nature of that spiritual place? So, yes, somebody may like to take up that ridiculous argument that we actually... But you see, Prabhu, the point is that we only are taking our guidance from all of the acharyas. And all of the acharyas, without exception, Srila Prabhupada in particular, have not said in any way that the jiva is possible to fall from that spiritual world, that spiritual reality. We fell from, or we came from a spiritual existence. Understand that we are going to speak today on something of Advaya Gyan Paratattva, because that's the only way you can describe these Chatushloki verses. And in that description, which I'm going to come to today, that is a description of the three aspects of Krishna. Vadanti tat tattva vidas tattvam yajnanam advayam brahmati paramatmati Bhagavan iti shabhyate. So the Brahman, the Paramatma, and Bhagavan, three aspects of Krishna. In the Paramatma feature of Krishna, it only has one quality. Krishna has three principal qualities or energies or functions: Sat, Chit, Ananda. These three energies are what he utilizes to manifest the entire material creation. All the jivas are manifesting their bodies from the Sat potency. Their knowledge is coming from the Chit potency. And the bliss that they experience materially of Jad Ananda is coming from the Hladini or Ananda Shakti. So all these Shaktis are influencing the entire creation. So within the Brahmajyoti, I'm still answering your question, within the Brahmajyoti there is only one quality, and that quality is Chit, knowledge. It's not Sat. Devotees often become confused because the terminology we say is Sat, Chit, Ananda. So we think, oh, Sat must be within the Brahmajyoti. Sat means existence. The Brahmajyoti has no specific existence. It's the brilliant effulgence of the Lord. So it has that quality of knowledge. But that knowledge within the body of Mahavishnu is only knowledge of a dormant state. It's like the state of a stone. It's just like Om. It's just like nothing is going on. There's no variety, there's no bliss, there's totally nothing. But there's a fraction of this knowledge is there. So that is the place where we have come from. And we have come and we made this decision due to our weakened condition. It's described very clearly in Jivadharma. We didn't have this, what's called Bal Shakti. We didn't have spiritual strength to determine that this glitter of Maya was not in our best interest to be attracted to. And more than that, we had the audacity to actually turn our backs on Krishna. I discussed this the other day. We became Vimukh. So this is how we actually came into this world, from that place. So we are carrying something of an impersonal impression. How perhaps most of us sitting here, or many of us, prior to coming in contact with devotional service, were somewhat impersonally inclined. We naturally wanted the bliss of something for ourselves. Now the whole purification, which we've been discussing in the 10th canto in the evening, comes from this selfless nature. This selfless nature of adoring or worshipping the object of all supremacy. This is actually what is going to give us the highest sweetness that we want. Now, as our progress develops, gradually that taste becomes more profound, and by that higher taste, we can relinquish this ridiculous impersonal conception that I am something to do with the center of the universe. It's a long process. Even we hear the knowledge day after day, week after week, year after year, still, when it comes down to it, yes, I want that piece of cake for me. I don't want to offer it straight to Krishna. That's not the foremost thing in my consciousness. I haven't realized yet how much bliss there is in fulfilling my spiritual nature. My real spiritual nature, who I am, is just to bring pleasure to the Lord. If I could realize even a particle of that, how much successful would I be in my bhajan? But this is the path. So initially, Krishna himself, directly to Lord Brahma, is saying, all of me. He's talking about me. He's trying to actually and in all of Prabhupada's commentaries and purports, he's battling the impersonalists in these 4 chatushlokis. Who is the impersonalist? It's not some group that lives over there. It's right inside my heart. This is the impersonalist that he's battling with. This is the Mayavadi that he's battling with. When we read these to begin with, we're thinking, oh, no, I'm in ISKCON. I don't have anything to do with those guys. But who is it? It's me. I'm the one. I'm the culprit. So he discusses through like this. Now Prabhupada says at the end of this purport of the verse I've just said, which is verse 32, the Chatushloki begins in verse 33. At the end, chapter 9, second canto, 2:9:32 is the verse I've just discussed. The Chatushloki begins 2:9:33. Very important to remember this number, because it's the seed, it's the root of the entire Bhagavatam. And it's exactly what we've just been talking about. It's replacing our impersonal conception with a personal understanding of the Supreme Lord and how to engender loving devotional service to Him. That's all it's about. There's nothing more to be said. So why do we speak for hours and hours? Why do we have so many other books? Because we can't accept it. The mind is so tricky, it'll go boom, boom, this way, this way, this way, trying to find some cheating process where I can still hold on to my personal material identity at the same time as have the goods. Rubbish. We'll never do it. All we'll do is get a headache. That's actually what will happen. So Prabhupada is saying that the Lord has unlimited numbers of transcendental qualities. He's trying to impress us. Prabhupada's mercy is so profound. when he is sitting in that transcendental state of realization, that realization of performing devotional service directly to his beloved Lord, and yet he comes away from there, comes to the darkness of the Western world, and repeats again and 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 again, in almost every single commentary that he gives, this same message. Please recognize, acknowledge the personal aspect of the Lord. So, of course, this is being deeply reinforced when we read from subjects like Venugita in the evening. When we just become immersed in those topics, we don't think of anything else except Krishna while we're hearing those topics. But as soon as we come away from those topics, again the gnawing of the mind becomes, louder and louder. So the Lord has unlimited numbers of transcendental qualities, and one of them is his affection for his unalloyed devotees. In the history of the mundane world, we can appreciate his transcendental qualities. The Lord incarnates himself for the protection of his devotees. In other words, we see Bhagavad Gita. That's like the history of the world, the Mahabharata. Archaeologically, whether we can prove it or not, the Battle of Mahabharata did actually take place. And I'm sure you'll come up with something over the next period of years to substantiate that. He arranged that battle for the annihilation of the faithless. His activities are in relationship with his devotees. Srimad Bhagavatam is full of such activities of the Lord in relationship with his devotees. This is what the Bhagavatam is about. Our discussion is only about the Bhagavatam. And I'm holding on to the words that Gopinandini shared with us, that Srila Gurudev said in his last visit to America, that I want you to read this Bhagavatam, I want you to hear this Bhagavatam, I want you to study this Bhagavatam, I want you to distribute this Bhagavatam. What else?
Serve.
And become Bhagavat.
Serve Bhagavatam.
Serve Bhagavatam, yes, serve Bhagavatam. Serve Bhagavatam, yes. And the non-devotees have no knowledge of such pastimes. So this is what we've been talking about. We're opening our consciousnesses to the knowledge of Srimad Bhagavatam so that we can increase our faith. When our faith is strong, Shraddha is strong. Shraddha is never like fixed in a sense. Shraddha is a growing commodity. It's increasing moment by moment by moment. It's not, oh yes, now I have Shraddha, now I'm at the next stage, Bhajana Kriya, Anartha-Nivritti, etc. It's not like that. In every single stage, the quality of Shraddha is present. In every single stage of our devotion, it's magnifying. The Lord lifted the Govardhan hill when he was only 7 years old and protected his pure devotees at Vrindavan from the wrath of Indra, who was over-flooding the place with rain. Now, this lifting of Govardhan hill by a 7-year-old boy may be unbelievable for the faithless, but for the devotees it is absolutely believable. We have no doubts about this at all. We live with this. Because we have opened up this quality that Bhaktivedanta Thakur calls achintya bhav. We accept the inconceivable. Very simply. Why? How can we do that? Through some mercy of humility. We have some humility, so we can accept this. You cannot accept this if you're a proud intellectual in the material world. If you tell someone, materially that a little boy lifted a mountain, I can remember once telling my father, that there were living entities within the sun planet. He just hit the roof, He just condemned me forever. Because no achintya bhav was there, no practice had gone on, He threw a rock at me. So this is the nature of the materialists. They have no achintya bhav. Achintya means inconceivable. They can't accept the inconceivable. Why? Because they're so proud, it has to fit into some intellectual analysis where they can put it in their pockets and say, yes, I figured it out, yes, I can accept that. Like a scientist, right? He can figure it out all out, analyze it right down, say, yes, I can accept that fact. But a devotee, he accepts so many inconceivable propositions. The devotee believes in the almighty potency of the Lord, while the faithless say that the Lord is almighty, but do not believe it. Isn't that amazing? Prabhupada says that. They say, oh, Almighty Lord, but they don't actually believe he's almighty. You know, something just like a bomb drops out of the sky or something, and they say, oh, this one did it or that one did it. They don't see it in relationship to the Supreme. The principal teaching today in this whole explanation of these 4 Chatushloki verses, I don't know how far we're going to get with them, but we're going to attempt, is that there is nothing in existence that is separate from the Lord. If the devotee knows this fact, this is called Advaya. Advaya means one. Advaya Gyan, knowledge of Krishna's oneness in totality. Not Advaita. Advaita is the belief that everything is one with Krishna. Dvaita means two. Advaita means one. That's a different type of philosophy. Advaya means one. Advaya Gyan Paratattva. The Supreme Lord is the summation of everything in existence. There is nothing in existence separate from the Lord. Nothing. Nothing at all. We'll discuss that in a few minutes when we get to that part more fully. I discussed this last year also. But we can hear it again and again. Because actually, Gurudev concludes in many of his discussions on this topic, if you understand this Advaya Gyan Paratattva, you can never again succumb to the material influence and believe that you're actually the material body. You can't. It becomes so riveted, so enforced. Yes, I am essentially a spirit soul, a particle of the Lord. Even if you don't believe you're a spirit soul, you're still connected. You're still a part of His energy. You can't be separate from Him. There is nothing in existence separate from the Lord. Such men with a poor fund of knowledge do not know that the Lord is the Lord eternally, and that one cannot become the Lord by meditation for millions of years or by mental speculation for billions of years. So this is the ambition of many souls on the world. They haven't understood the Srimad Bhagavatam. By some great misfortune, the Bhagavatam hasn't arrived in their purview in this life, and they want to become knowledgeable, and therefore they follow the impersonal conception to think that I can become God. And this is what most spiritual groups other than the Hare Krishnas are focusing and aiming at. This is what they're trying to do. They're trying to bring up their core spiritual identity and recognize that identity as being the ultimate supreme. There's one story of one yogi called Muktananda, and I read his book before I became a devotee, and he goes through his meditation, and he comes to, the book is called The Blue Pearl, and in his meditation he sees a blue pearl, and inside that blue pearl he sees a little boy playing a flute, and he thinks, oh, that's me. This is actually what he says. Oh, this is my identity. So that's the illusion of the poor soul who doesn't have this Bhagavatam. I was just reflecting how in the early days, there's pictures of some of the German devotees distributing like piles of the whole Srimad Bhagavatam sets, walking on the street, distributing all these sets of Bhagavatams. Like, how amazing is that? How much mercy must they have got? The impersonal interpretation of the mundane wranglers is completely refuted in this verse, because it is clearly stated that here that the Supreme Lord has His qualities, form, pastimes, and everything that a person has. All these descriptions of the transcendental nature of the personality of Godhead are factual realizations by the devotee of the Lord, and by the causeless mercy of the Lord, they are revealed to His pure devotee and to no one else. So these are revealed by the mercy of the pure devotee, that personality who has himself understood and recognized and experienced these truths without any shadow of doubt. It's so much more simple for us to be discussing these topics in Vrindavan, because in Vrindavan there's such a profound impression of Krishna everywhere. It's very hard to maintain an impersonal conception here. There's 4,000 or 5,000 temples. Everywhere you go, there's another beautiful form of the Lord. People are saying, Radhe, Radhe, Radhe. It's all resonating, this personal conception. This is why residence and staying for some period of time in Vrindavan is so beneficial for the conditioned soul. It's so important for us to stay here, to get that influence, to get that impact fully of glorification, devotional service to the Lord. In the West, it's utterly vacant. It's completely the antithesis of all of that. But the West is the most beautiful place for us to go and demonstrate Krishna's Karuna Shakti, his mercy. We should only go there for one reason, to give this, to distribute this. We don't go there for bhajan. We don't need to go there for any resources. It's a phenomena. You can live in Vrindavan forever, if you get a visa, of course. But it's not about money. Somehow resources always come in Vrindavan. You never have to worry for any sort of... It's a phenomena. You ask any devotee who lives here for a long period of time, money always seems to be there. There always seems to be enough for 3 rotis and some sabji. There always is enough. But in the West, there's never enough. It doesn't matter how much you have, that's the illusion. It's a phenomena. It's all upside down in the Western world. Okay, so now we come to text 33, which is the first verse of the Chatushloki. Aham eva sam eva gre, nan yad yat sad asat param, paschad aham yat etak cha ya vishyate so samyaham. Now, it's described that within these 4 verses, they're analyzed by Jiva Goswami and other great, great scholars to fall in the categories of Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojan. These 4 verses. And they're also analyzed as to fall into the category of Gyan, Vigyan, Rahasya, and Tad Anga. So if you can remember those different categories, it's helpful. So the first is Sambandha. So Sambandha is Gyan, knowledge of this absolute reality. Now the translation is, Krishna is saying directly to Lord Brahma, it is I, the personality of Godhead, who was existing before the creation, when there was nothing but myself. Now understand this very clearly. Prabhupada explains, just like a king. A king, if it's saying the king is walking in the forest, it doesn't mean the king is alone walking in the forest. It means the king and his associates is walking in the king and his entourage is walking in the forest. So don't have the impression, Krishna is just sitting there in some sort of blackness and there's nothing else. There never was a time when he and his associates did not exist. So it's Krishna and all of his spiritual world that was existing. Don't think that it's just that individual personality. It is that individual personality at the same time, but it's also with all of his associates. For many years I was having the impression that just Krishna was sitting there alone in some sort of blackness. It's not like that. Nor was there the material nature. In the very beginning, this material nature didn't exist. The cause of this creation. Krishna is the cause of this creation. That which you see now is also I. What you are seeing in front of you is also Krishna in his energetic form, the personality of Godhead. And after annihilating, what remains will also be I, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Prabhupada is very generous in giving us this terminology. Personality, 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 again and again and again and again and again. It does engender a sort of Aishwarya image, but that is very helpful initially. And just like Gurudev has said so many times, your Prabhupada came to tell you, Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, I have come to tell you that he's not. So that is a chintya again. The devotee can very easily recognize this, or reconcile this rather. We hear the example Prabhupada gives himself of the High Court judge. He comes into the courthouse with his robes, etc. He's completely honored by all the people in the court because he has life and death in his hand. But when he goes home at night, he's just rolling on the floor with his grandson. He's nothing like that same worshipable personality. So this is the difference. Same personality, except in a different mood. So it's not so difficult to understand this difference between Aishwarya and Madhurya at all. But we have to recognize it to go forward in Raganuga Bhakti, which is the heart of what Mahaprabhu has come to give us. So, in understanding that everything in existence is Krishna, we understand this teaching from Jiva Goswami that he's given us, that Srila Gurudev speaks so many times. If you want to reference this teaching I'm about to speak, this Advaya Gyan Paratattva, it's in very clearly in the Walking with a Saint book, the first one. What was that, 2009? 8.
I think, yeah.
8 was the first one.
I think so.
Okay, so 2008. And it's right in the beginning there. Shamarani is explaining it, Padmanabh Maharaj is explaining it, Madhav Maharaj is explaining it, and Gurudev is explaining it. So you can explain it in, so many different ways. But essentially, it's showing very clearly the explanation of this verse. Brahmati Paramatmati Bhagavan iti Shabhyate. It is all essentially one. Just like a candle. If you have a candle, the candle has 3 aspects to it, doesn't it? It has the form of the flame, the beautiful golden, reddish, bluish flame itself. And then it has a second aspect to it, which is the heat of the candle. It's different in a sense to the flame, yet it's the same. And then it has the illumination. Again, that's different, yet it's the same. So Krishna is like this. He is one, and yet he has 3 aspects to him. He has his essential form, Bhagavan, and then he has his expansion as Paramatma, Supersoul, within the heart of all living entities. It's not anything different from Krishna. It's the same as Krishna. And then there is the effulgence of Krishna. Now these have been broken down and described with different degrees of energy for our clarification. This is very helpful indeed to have this knowledge, because it dispels the darkness of any ignorance. So, as I've already described, the energy or the Shakti within the effulgence is what? What did I say before? Chit. Chit Shakti. The Chit Shakti is in the Brahmajyoti. And then Paramatma, because it has form, it's Sat and Chit. But it's devoid, it's like a yogi. A yogi will aim at this Paramatma realization. The Jnani will aim at the Brahmajyoti. So the Jnani will have so much knowledge, but he won't have a recognition of the form of the Lord. He won't have that Sat aspect. He'll only have the Chit. So the Jnani, he only has the Chit understanding. The yogi has the Sat and the Chit, but he doesn't have the bliss because he hasn't recognized devotional service. He's only recognized his own glory and greatness as a mystic siddhi. He hasn't recognized the sweetness of exchange and relationship, of intimacy. And the Bhakta, he has all 3, Sat, Chit, Ananda. So within Bhagavan is residing Sat, Chit, Ananda. So try and appreciate these 3 degrees, the Jnani, the Yogi, and the Bhakta, and the Brahmajyoti, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. Parallel those. Now, Jiva Goswami, he's presented 3 objections himself in his Sandarbhas. He's written. The first objection is called Swagat. Swagat Bade, that there is a difference in the Lord. How can he be one? The Lord, he has eyes. they're different from him. He has hands, they're different from him. He has feet, he has legs, they're different from him. There's a difference in his very form. This is what he's proposing. He's so brilliant, Jiva Goswami. Jiva Goswami is one of the greatest scholars in our line. They have a whole university section for him in Varanasi, just dedicated to Jiva Goswami's works. He did such extensive study to purify this impersonal misconception, principally. So now how can this be dispelled? So in the Brahma Samhita there's a beautiful verse, Angyani yasya sakalendriya ritimanti pashyanti panti charyam charyam jati. I can't remember all the verse. So in this verse it's saying, Angyani yasya sakalendriya ritimanti, that all the limbs of the Lord act in the same capacity. He can eat with his eyes, he can see with his ears, he can hear with his legs. This is the unique form of the Lord's spiritual body. Again, our Achintya Shakti has to be uppermost. If we're actually contradicting this in our minds, look at, why am I doing this? Oh, I think I'm more intelligent than this knowledge that is coming. I think I know more. This is called the false ego is more prominent. The false ego needs to be purified by the process to accept this proposition, to accept this understanding. So this way, this rohita, this Ved, this difference is rohita, it's purified. This swagat Ved. Swa means own, gat is like form. So this first objection is saying that there is a difference in the body of Krishna. And then the second objection that he raises, sa jat. Jat means group or type. So Krishna, he has so many incarnations. He has so many expansions. Swamsa, Swa-amsa. Krishna is the Amsa, the origin. And then Swa. Swa means own Amsas. We are Vibhin Amsas. We are separated parts from Krishna. We're not coming directly from Krishna. We're separated parts of his energy. So these Swa-amsa, these incarnations of Krishna, they all appear to be different from Krishna. When you see Brajendranandan Krishna, and then you see the ferocious form of the Nrsingadev, or when you see the huge, amazing form of Varaha, or you see the form of Kurmadev, or Matsya, or Parashuram, or Ram, or Vamanadev. When you see all these different personalities, they appear to be quite different. Now, Jiva Goswami, he refutes his own objection. He says, just like when you see the 16 stages of the moon, now I think it's what, half moon, or getting down to the Amavasya, where there's no moon. But it's still the full moon. Where's the rest of the moon gone? Oh, it's just walked off somewhere. Of course not. The moon is there in its fullness, but we're only seeing through the reflection of the sun a part of the moon. So similarly, these different stages of the moon that we say, we don't say, oh, that's a quarter moon. There's no other moon. The full moon has actually gone somewhere else. No, that's a quarter of the full moon. Similarly, these incarnations or avatars of the Lord are aspects of the Lord's nature. Like Nrsingadev is this viraras, he wants to experience this chivalry mood in the form of Nrsingadev. So all the avatars, they have their specific quality that Krishna wants to taste in excess in that particular avatar. So like this, all of the avatars are actually Brajendranandan Sri Krishna. They're not separate. It's not that the Nrsingadev is separate from Krishna. He's only showing to the world qualities of a different nature to Brajendranandan Krishna, but he's certainly not separate. Exactly like the moon. So this is described in the Brahma Samhita again, Advaitam, Achyutam, Anadim, Anantarupam, in this verse of the Brahma Samhita. So that is purifying that misconception that there's a difference between Krishna and his incarnations. And then there's a third objection by Jiva Goswami, Vijat Ved, that Maya and the Jiva, well, they are different from the Lord. But then it's described that if two substances are coming from the one origin, then there can be no difference if their source is not in conflict. They are the same. They're coming from the same. Where do the jivas come from? Where does Maya come from? They're both emanating from the Lord. So something that comes from the same source cannot ultimately, in its origin, be different. It must be the same. It's called avastu. Vastu, not avastu. It's called vastu. And vastu is an essential object that cannot be divided, so to speak. So there are the three vastus. There's Krishna, the Jiva, and Maya. They're all coming from that original form of the Lord, though. So in this way, this objection is overruled by Jiva Goswami himself. So understanding this, what I've just said, it's called, I've said it in a very short way because I want to go further on here, but you can elaborate on that greatly. But basically that's called Advaya Gyan Paratattva, knowledge of the oneness of Krishna. And this whole Chatushloki basically is supporting this understanding that there is only Krishna in existence. He is the current that runs through everything. And how to understand that is what the Bhagavatam is made up of. All these different stages in the Bhagavatam are showing conclusively how everything is resting on that 10th stage of Ashraya, on that support. Everything is being supported by the understanding that Krishna is the summum bonum of transcendence and that nothing else has any value. So this verse is showing the aspect of knowledge, that with knowledge one can understand that Krishna is that supreme person. This is also described in the Chatushloki of the Srimad Bhagavad Gita. The first verse of the Bhagavad Gita, Chatushloki, is Aham Sarvasya Prabhava Matahar Sarvam Pravartante Iti Bhajate Mam. Who can tell me? No? Sanskrit scholars? What, the Sanskrit or the translation? Brahma. Krishna is speaking to Lord Brahma. It is I. And he's pointing his finger at himself while he's doing it. All the commentators say like this. The personality of Godhead, who was existing before the creation. Before which creation? Before this material creation. When there was nothing but myself. There was only that spiritual entity, Sri Krishna and his entourage. Nor was there the material nature, the cause of this creation. This material nature is likened to being the cause of the creation. But that material nature has come from Krishna. That which you see now is also I, the personality of Godhead. What you're seeing in front of you is I. After the annihilation, what remains will also be I. So in any condition, that I is predominating. Aham Sarvasya. Aham Sarvasya. I am the controller of the material and spiritual worlds, he's saying in Bhagavad Gita. And Prabhupada goes here into a beautiful discussion about the I principle, because the Mayavad or the impersonalist can interpolate this I to be me, the jiva. And Prabhupada is explaining this. He says that, I'll read it for you. The impersonalist puts forward the theory of oneness in the sense that Brahma, also being the same principle of I, because he is an emanation from the I, the absolute truth, is identical with the Lord, the principle of I, and that there is nothing more than this principle of I is explained in this verse. Now Prabhupada says, accepting the argument of the difference between the two I's, namely the predominator, I, and the predominated, I. So it's like there are two I's. Therefore, there are still two I's, even accepting the argument of the impersonalist. But we must note carefully that these two I's are accepted in the Vedic literature in the sense of quality. Now this brings to another point that needs to just be, I need to remind us here, that the Jiva and Krishna are the same in quality. We have the same quality as Krishna, but in minute form. And this is described very beautifully in the Bhagavatam itself and also in Jivadharma. There are 9 specific aspects to showing why the Jiva and Krishna are the same in quality. We need to understand this if we understand. To understand spirituality, yes, I am a spiritual entity. What is the nature of that spirit? That spirit is a part of Krishna. That spirit is coming from Krishna. So that quality of spirit in me is the same in minute form as is in Krishna. Now there are 9 descriptions of why that quality is the same. This topic is quite heady. Many times when Gurudev discusses it, he apologizes in the evening. He says, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I made your brains work so hard today." Many times he said like that, because actually it really tests our capacity for comprehension. So let me just say these 9 points. You should write them down. They're very valuable. The first is Gyan Swarup. Gyan Swarup. The Jiva has the capacity to accept knowledge. So does Krishna have the capacity to accept knowledge. The second one is called Nata Swarup. J-N-A-T-A. That J is like the spelling of Gyan with a dash over the end. J-N-A-T-A. Nata Swarup. That means I become the embodiment or the repository of that knowledge. So Krishna also is the repository of knowledge. I also can be a container of knowledge. And then the third one is Bhaktri Swarup. I am an enjoyer. And Krishna is an enjoyer also. Bhaktri. Bhaktri. Like Bhaktanam Yagyatapasham. Krishna is the supreme enjoyer of all yagya. So, Bhaktri Swarup.
Maharaj, I've heard though that the Jiva is the enjoyed.
Yes, he is the enjoyed. Nevertheless, by being enjoyed by Krishna, he also naturally will get some enjoyment by that. He also has so much ananda, bliss within him. We're not devoid of bliss. Yes, definitely, we are the enjoyed by Krishna. Nevertheless, Krishna cannot enjoy us. If the gopis were all miserable, how could he enjoy their company and association? The gopis are so joyful. Krishna is so joyful. So the two together create even more joy. But yes, it's true, we are the enjoyed. We're the predominated. So that's the third one, Bhaktri. And then Mantri. Mantri Swarup. Mantri Swarup means I make decisions. I make decisions, Krishna makes decisions. Mantri Swarup. And then Ketra Gyan, it's described. I know the field of activities in my own body. Ketra means field. Ketra Gyan. So this Ketra Gyan Swarup, I know the field of activities in my body. Krishna knows the field of activities in all bodies. This is the difference. So in each case there's an enormous difference. The analogy is if you take a spoonful of water from the ocean, the water in the spoon is exactly the same as the water in the ocean, but it's not the same at all, because the water in a spoon is so small in comparison to the enormity of the ocean. So in the sense of size or quantity, the quantity is so vast in the Supreme, we don't even get a reckoning. It's very simple. We just recognize that I am a spiritual spark of that Supreme, like fire, so to speak. Like a fire sometimes emanates sparks, come out of the fire. The sparks and the fire are the same essence, aren't they? If the spark, for example, lands in some dry grass, it can start another blaze from itself. So that spiritual essence is within us. Of course it's within us. This is what we're trying to bring out. But we get confused and we think of the greatness of my own spiritual spark is equal to the greatness of the fire. This is where the impersonal conception covers us over. So, Ketra Gyan Swarup. And then Para Prakash. Para Prakash means we have the capacity to give light to others. For example, if you're very joyful, you can come and you can make someone else joyful. If you have clairvoyant vision, you can see the color of the aura, and you can see that increased. If you're very happy, then you can increase someone else's brightness. So in that way, it's called Para Prakash. We have the ability to increase someone else's illuminated aura. And then Ichamai. Ichamai means filled with desire. We are certainly filled with desire. We have all kinds of desire. Krishna also has desires. So this is another quality that is the same. It's very wonderful if you get to know these, because then if a Mayavad comes and says, oh, don't you know I'm God? You say, yes, you're God. Because this and this and this. Yes, you are, in one sense. But in the larger sense, of course, you're not. You're illusioned. So, Ichamai, desire. We desire, Krishna desires. And then, Shuddha Deha. We have a pure body. We have a pure spiritual form. And Krishna also has a pure spiritual form. Shuddha Deha. Is that 9?
8.
Oh, God. What's the one I've forgotten? Paraprakash. Paraprakash. I think it's Deha Prakash. You know, I was almost going to bring my little book with me. I thought, no, I know these automatically. Okay. I think it's Deha Prakash. Put this last one in brackets and I'll have to tell you tonight. Or I'll think of it in a couple of minutes. But there's 9 qualities that are in the jiva that are also in Krishna. Understand those qualities and don't forget to ask me to confirm the 9th one. I think the 9th one is the jiva's illumination. It's called Deha Prakash. Deha Prakash means the light of his body. We have a light to our spiritual identity. Krishna also has a light to his spiritual identity. I'm pretty sure that's the 9th one. But I'll just check it tonight.
Do these 9 qualities just apply to our transcendental form, or even in our now and our
Well, that's a nice question. She's asking, do these 9 qualities apply to our transcendental form, or do they apply now? Now I am living due to the empowerment of my soul. If my soul chooses to leave the body, I'm dead. So I'm getting a partial influence from all of these qualities through my material senses to some degree. But in its highest form, of course, all of these are heightened within the pure form of the jiva. Nevertheless, these qualities are filtering through. Now you desire. Where does the desire come from? That's certainly not entirely spiritual, but then when we desire spiritually, we only desire, oh, how can I please Sri Radha now? She's become so distraught because Krishna's not here. What can I do to please her? So my ambition becomes replaced with the spiritual, direction. But still, that material perversion was what we were experiencing in the conditioned state fully. But it's still something of a spiritual reflection. Knowledge in the material world, it's empiric knowledge called bhautik gyan. But that thirst for knowledge in the world, it has its origin in the soul's desiring to understand his situation in the world. So when it's purified to a state of more transcendental appreciation, then it comes in contact with the soul. So it's like our conditioned mind is of course influenced by the illumination of the soul. But understand, all these qualities that we have, this described the jiva has 50 qualities. In another sense, Lord Brahma has 55 qualities. The demigods, they have those same 50 qualities, but to a much greater degree than the jivas. The demigods are also jivas. Lord Shiva has 55 qualities also. Then Lord Narayan, he has 60 qualities, and Krishna himself has 64 qualities. So this is always showing us, as she said, we are being the enjoyed. Krishna is the enjoyer, the Supreme Purush, and we are the enjoyed. I knew I wasn't going to finish this. So we're up to time already. So in this, so I've read the first Chaturshloki. The second Chaturshloki I'm just going to read. It's very, very beautiful. And it consists of what is called knowledge again. It's still the Sambandha aspect, if you write these 4 verses down. I'm saying this in a very analytical way because it's being videoed, and you can watch it again, and you can write notes, and you can put it in the different categories. So the first Chaturshloki is in Sambandha Gyan, and it's also categorized by being knowledge, Gyan. The second verse is still in the category of Sambandha Gyan, but it's Vigyan. It's realized knowledge now. The second verse is going to be an understanding of what is Vigyan. And this is verse 34 of the 9th chapter of the 2nd canto. Rite ritam yat pratiyata na pratiyata katmani tadvid yat atmano mayam yato basa yato tamaha. Did you have a question before? Yes. So relationship. Who am I and who is Krishna? How can I have relationship before I know who Krishna is? If I think Krishna is impersonal, this is dispelling any impersonal doubt. Both of these verses, both these first 2 verses are addressing this aspect of our disease of impersonalism and making emphatically aham eva sam eva ge, I, pointing a finger at his chest, me, this person you see in front of me. All of what I have spoken about, this Advaya Gyan, is to dispel the impersonal conception. And this second verse of the Chaturshloki also, it's described as being Vigyan, but it's still under the umbrella of Sambandha, because it's still about opening up us to understanding what is my relationship with the Supreme Lord. It's still with Sambandha. So, Rite Ritam Yat Pratiyata. This, O Brahma, whatever appears to be of any value, if it is without relationship to me, has no reality. This is exactly what I just described in this Advaya Gyan Paratattva. If it's not in relationship to Krishna, it ultimately has no reality whatsoever. For that, serious sadhak, devotee, once we start to get a taste for these types of topics, then naturally anything else just starts to fall away. We don't have to work hard at trying to dispel the negative influences. They automatically fade, just like the darkness will go away when the illumination comes. Automatically, as our taste for Krishna. Therefore, when we hear in the 10th canto, Vikriditam Brajavadubi Echamcha Vishnu, hear these topics of the Supreme Lord. This illumination is going to push this negative impersonal conception away. Because why? Because it brings the most beautiful form and personality of the Lord right into the front of our consciousnesses. How can the darkness of this doubt or impersonal conception remain? It just flies away. This is the power in these verses, that any doubt about the supremacy of that person will just be dispelled forever. This is the power in these verses. It has no reality unless it's in relationship to me. Know it to be my illusory energy, that reflection which appears in the darkness. So sunlight is not acknowledged without darkness. And also there must be reflection. There must be reflection of that light. This whole world is like the reflection of the spiritual. The sun itself is the reflection of the spiritual Brahmajyoti that ultimately is coming from the potency of Sri Radha. Every time we look at the sun, we can remember Sri Radha scientifically. And then in Leela, Radha is that person who worships the sun. She feels that she's from that sun planet, and she worships Surya Dev daily. So we're so linked, and we spend 12 hours a day walking under Surya Dev. So how can we forget Radha for a moment? It's totally all wound up in Sri Radha. And also that tejas, that power that gives us that sunlight. Where is that coming from? It's coming ultimately from Sri Radha. Sri Radha is Krishna's Swarup. She's Krishna's energetic form. Krishna himself doesn't perform any of these things. This is why another topic I really wanted to discuss today, there's not so much time, but I'll go for another 5 or 10 minutes, just to give you some hints of this, if you can handle another 5 minutes. So, prior to the advent of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, all of the 4 sampradayas were under the conception that Krishna's body himself transformed to become this material world, that everything was a transformation from Krishna. This philosophy is called Vastu. Vastu is that entity, Parinamvad. All of the sampradayas supported this, Vastu Parinamvad. But Mahaprabhu said, no, this is not the truth. It's not that Krishna himself is transforming into the material elements. It is his Shakti that is transforming. Shakti Parinamvad. This is the teaching that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu brought. Shakti Parinamvad. It is Krishna's energy. It is Sri Radha who is transforming into this material world for the pleasure of Krishna. That's Swarup Shakti. So this is Shakti Parinamvad. It's a very important point to know and understand. You should take note of this. It's not Vastu. Madhavacharya, Ramanuja, Nimbaditya, Vishnu Swami, they all supported Vastu Parinamvad. But Mahaprabhu, he purified that. Said, no, it is Shakti Parinamvad. We should understand this point. It's a very beautiful point. This is not just about knowledge or gyan. This understanding gives us an appreciation of Krishna. It shows us how sweet is Krishna, how beautiful is Krishna. Don't take it into the jnani type place of consciousness. It's not like that. It's all filled with sweetness and love and affection. If we approach these topics with this type of mood, wanting to develop that intimate, sweet relationship with Krishna, then these topics become very simple to understand. They're not all heady and, to do with trying to, mentally work it out with gyan. It's founded on the platform of sweetness and love. It's to take us into that world, into that realm.
That concept that existed before the appearance of Mahaprabhu, was that in any way related or based on the concept of the universal form presented in Bhagavad Gita?
Yes. Yes.
Is that the basis of it?
Yes. That's a good point. I never thought of that. Yeah.
This is from
Yeah.
Journey of the Soul, right? Gurudev explaining Journey of the Soul, very deep.
This is more than that.
Okay.
Journey of the Soul is like the introduction. But what he's just mentioned is very beautiful. That Virata Rupa form that is described, that universal form, that Vishwarup form that is described in the Bhagavad Gita, also it's described prior to this in the Srimad Bhagavatam, that the Virata Rupa. We discussed the other day how the mountains are his bones, the trees and vegetation are the hairs on his body, etc. So this, again, is dispelling the impersonal conception. But it's also allowing the misconception to remain of this Vastu Parinamvad, that actually everything is coming from Krishna. But actually it's not coming from Krishna, it's coming from his Shakti. Everything is coming from his Shakti, because ultimately everything is going to be, you see, we always have two levels of discussion. We have the Tattva Vichar and we have the Rasa Vichar. It's like two parallel sequences of thought going simultaneously. We have to be very achintya here, we have to open the consciousness. So in the Tattva Vichar, of course, Krishna is the Supreme Lord. But in the Rasa Vichar, which is what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to taste and distribute primarily himself, is showing that no, Sri Radha is the absolute. Who is the controller of Vrindavan? Is it Krishna? Never. Radharani would smack your face if she heard you say that. She is the boss. Always she is the boss, completely, because she controls Krishna. Utterly. If any of the gopis think that actually Krishna is independent, they know that Sri Radha completely controls Krishna. Fully. If Radha leaves the Rasa Leela, there's 350 million gopis dancing, and then Sri Radha decides to leave. What happens? Does it all still go on? Oh, we can do without Radha? Never. Everything stops, and Krishna leaves. Like a little lamb who's following along after Radha, trying to pacify her man. She is the Shakti Parinamvad. So it goes from the Rasa, from the Tattva Vichar to the Rasa Vichar. You see the threads. They're connected. It's all connected. Nothing is separate from the Rasa Vichar. You can't separate it and say, oh, well, that's just a different type of... We won't discuss Rasa, we'll just discuss Tattva. It doesn't make sense without the Rasa. We have to go into the lake of Rasa to get the balance. Okay. Thank you for your kind attention. I'm sorry I didn't finish the verses. There's 2 more verses to do.
Is the other 2 verses?
We'll do them tomorrow.
Abhidayam, right?
Yes, yes. And they're also called Rahasya and Tadangam. Rahasya means very mysterious, like the Prayojan. And Tadangam means that which is associated with the Lord, or the Abhideya. Abhideya means the method to access. So the method is devotional service. That's going to be explained in the 4th verse. So I'll explain the next 2 verses tomorrow. Yes, sir.
I just wanted to throw the question out to the group here that I presented to Maharaj the other day. It was not an archaeological question. It was more of a sastric question in the way that my background is somewhat in archaeology, and it's not that I'm looking at all for archaeological proof that these things happened. What I asked was just that you mentioned 350 million gopis here in Vrindavan, or 750 million people died on the battlefield of Kur, etc. So what it is that the material evidence, that the material culture that's left to us doesn't support the grandiose and opulent nature of these pastimes that we're reading. So I'm throwing this out to anyone here, if you can shed some light, assuming, of course, like we're all here in Vrindavan, we're thinking about this idea of 350 million gopis here. It's a bit beyond our conception in the time and space that we're here in. So I'm assuming that there is something sastrically that would support how when Krishna and all of his associates left this earth, that something changed, because what is left to us is a little bit different than what it is that we're reading. This is sastrically, I'm looking for something that supports, I would assume it's a Yogamaya's potency that would change.
Well, there's
things,
one verse,
a bit.
which sort of supports that, this Krishneshwara Dharma Pajite Dharmarjanati Visahada. When Krishna leaves, he leaves with all religion and truthfulness is leaving with him. So naturally that would imply that what would remain, which is the age of Kali, is going to be a covering over so much evidence, physical evidence.
Where is it from?
This is in this verse, Krishna Swadharma Pajite. It says, Krishna accompanied by religion, knowledge, etc. has departed. So all good qualities, in a sense, at the end of Dwapara Yuga, they externally.
Which canto is that in?
First, yeah. It's written on the very, when you open the fly cover, it's the verse that's written there. It's the very first verse.
First verse answers.
I personally suspect that the amount of archaeology that has been performed here in India is almost like so tiny and so small compared to places like Egypt, for example, or Greece, I would think, that they really haven't even begun to look. So maybe that's another reason why they haven't found anything yet. And the other thing is that the academia here in India is probably basically Mayavad, so they wouldn't even be interested or inclined to
That's very true.
anything related to Vedic culture as we see it.
But he was looking for some support of a covering, like Yoga Maya. Listen, this is a somewhat lengthy discussion. It's a very beautiful discussion. I want to stop now.
I just want to throw that out there. There's a lot of learned and senior devotees here, so...
No, you should talk to him. He's very learned. He knows all these things. He's a storehouse of information and understanding. Srila Gurudev Ki Jai. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare. Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Gaura Hari Bol. Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol. O Jaya Sachinandan Jaya Gaura Hari, Sachinandan Jaya Gaura Hari. O Jaya Radha Gopinath Radha Gopinath Radhe. O Jaya Radhe Jaya Radhe Jaya Radhe, Jaya Shri Radhe. Srimati Radharani Vrishabhalanandini Rajeshwari ki jai, Shri Radha Gopinath Ju ki jai, Satchinandana Gaudahari ki jai, Shri Vrindavan Dham ki jai, Shri Jamuna Devi Maharani ki jai, Giriraj Govardhan ki jai, Kadasi Brad ki jai, Srila Gurudev ki jai, Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Premanandi, Hari Hari Bo, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.